everyone, and welcome back to Mariana Mass Books. My name is Mariana, and today I am here with a Midyear Freak Out Tag. My last video was my People April TBR. What a time! I was so motivated with that, and then health happened. Or rather, yeah. So let's start with the questions, because I'm going to start with a question that I don't usually do, but this year it makes sense. There are many versions of this tag, as you know. I feel like at this point it's become a community tag, and people add and subtract. And anyway, so the first question that I don't usually answer, but that some people do, is how is your reading year going so far? And I'm going to answer it precisely because I haven't been filming since April, so it makes sense. So for the first 3 months of the year, I had been having just an insanely amazing reading year. I was so motivated. I was reading so many favorite books. I feel like I've really um come to just really know myself as a reader, and so I just know what books I'm going to like, and I've never been concerned with reading the book, right? Like the book that everyone is reading, or the book that if you have a booktube channel you have to review this book, right? Or things like that. I have never considered myself a book reviewer. I always say it, I am just a reader who talks about books in the internet. And so because of that, and because I know myself so well as a reader, I pick the books that I really want to read. I had made a video with my plans for the year at the beginning of the year, where I basically said, you know what, I want to read history, fantasy, and was it romance? That I said, I don't remember. But basically I was like, history includes, history nonfiction, historical fiction, and classics for me, because they are set in a historical period, or there is not contemporary times. So it is like if you're reading, say, Jane Austen, right? It's like reading a contemporary romance of the Regency, right? It's contemporary to the Regency, but it literally feels like you're reading Ali Hazelwood of the Regency. So you get a glimpse into like time periods, even though of course it's not like reading a history book, right? But it's kind of like if in the future someone reads Ali Hazelwood, and I don't know, they come across a scene where the main characters are exchanging text messages or something, and that would be accurate to things we do today, right? So things like that, where you get the glimpse of the quotidian aspect of history with classic books. And so that, for me, in the sense that I meant it, of I want to like soak in history with my books, that comes in a lot of ways: history nonfiction, historical fiction, and classics, right? Or yeah. So I was just having a fantastic reading year. I was doing I'm still doing, I've been failing for the last few months, but the first 3 months were like awesome. They're really good challenge. My body reads with Ale, Historathon, amazing history reads. And so yeah, that was like for the first 3 months. But then in April I had my MRI. Everything was good, just like to sum up, right? Everything was good, but I went into a really dark mental state, a lot of anxiety, but anxiety to the point where I could not read, nor even escapist reading, nor even just like, you know how for me it's like just trashy romance books. Nothing. I could not pick up a book. I talked about my surgery last year. It was really bad. I've had many surgeries, but one of those where you do have nights where you don't know if you're going to wake up, like that type of experience, right? So it does put you in like a very you develop trust issues with your body. And so when my MRI was getting closer, I started getting super anxious because any little thing, any little symptom, I would be scared that my brain tumors were acting up, right? And that I was going to need another surgery and stuff. So, April, no reading, nothing. Uh, I think my MRI was at the beginning of May. So it was like May and June of getting back in the groove. I got back to my body reading with Ale. I kind of like got back in the motivation. And then at the beginning of July, I started watching BookTube again. Shout out to Mara at Books Like Whoa and Justin at Triumphal Reads, because their videos have kind of like been motivating me back into BookTube and back into reading. I run a book club for my Patreon, in my in real life Patreon. I run a book club for it, but it's a slow book club. So that's like the purpose of the book club, is to be slow, uh, because of the topics that I write about. And so we take like 2 to 3 months per book, right? So it I had been reading for that. So we have read Wuthering Heights. We have read Maybe You Should Talk to Someone by Laurie Gottlieb. And then now we are reading Braiding Sweetgrass. We are over halfway. We have 1 month to go. So that had been my only reading. And then I think it was last month I listened to the second Amina Al Sirafi book, which is a book that I was looking forward to with my sister, who normally doesn't read fantasy, but she loves Amina, and so that's like a special sister thing. And so it kind of like got me back in the groove. And of course, Midyear Freak Out Time. Hold on. Sorry, I thought I heard the doorbell, but no. Um, Midyear Freakout time came, and I knew I was going to do the Midyear Freakout. You didn't think I wasn't going to do it. Come on, this is the reason why I opened my channel, and I've done it every year, and I'll continue to do it so long as I have a booktube channel, right? That is how my reading year has been going on so far. Question number 2 is or it's the question 1 normally, but in this case it will be number 2, is what is the best book you've read so far this year? And as usual, all of the books I'm going to talk about today could fit into several categories. But in order to talk about a different book in every question, I divided them to different questions, right? So coming up in different questions are going to be some books that are also the best books I've read this year. I would consider, I think, 2 or 3 the best books I've read this year. They will be coming up in later questions. But for this question, I am going to, the first one that came to mind is one of my new all-time favorite books. I definitely want to read it again at some point, and it is Notre Dame de Paris by Victor Hugo, which in English is translated for some reason as The Hunchback of Notre Dame. I didn't know that it was like a multi-POV book where you have different chapters for different um characters, right? And so I'm going to put it down because it's super chunky. I didn't read that physical copy, but I did read that translation. in my Kindle, and then I bought the hardcover because I just loved it so much. So you are following several characters that are all connected in some way because of, or rather through the cathedral, through Notre Dame, right? Notre Dame is like the point of connection for all of the characters of the novel. And Victor Hugo wrote this book to make um, Parisians or French people appreciate the medieval architecture that they had, and specifically Notre Dame is what he obviously talks about. I would say Notre Dame is the main character. Um, Everything revolves around it, and yeah. So this is a book. It's super dark. It's super sad. It's just I at the beginning I wasn't sure I could keep reading just because of the way that Quasimodo is talked about. This was written in the 19th century and it's set in the Middle Ages. I wanna say 15th or 14th century. Think of a book written in the 19th century and then set in a medieval period that talks about a person who is not able bodied. I just picture it, right? The way it's the language that is used. So at the beginning, I wasn't sure I was going to be able to keep reading because it's so hard to read. But I'm glad I kept going. It's If you don't like dark, this is, I was going to say, one of the, if not the darkest book I've ever read. If you don't like human suffering, stay away from this book because it is all about human suffering, injustice, darkness, and all in a very creepy medieval atmosphere. The descriptions of the cathedral, it's dark, it's gothic, it's creepy, it's amazing, and the writing is fantastic. And what else I wanted to say? Well, I actually had a project for this book that I started, and I was going to do a video about it, but then, I lost my motivation. Yeah, my project. I had a project with this book where I wanted to watch all the adaptations that have ever been done for this book and then do a video where I would talk about the book and all the adaptations. Mainly because I feel like the Disney adaptation is very misunderstood and is actually pretty genius in many ways, and I wanted to compare it to others and do like a compare and contrast and talk about all the other ones, and I was genuinely curious to see the others and see how they were. So I watched the Disney one that I hadn't seen since I was a kid. It completely blew me away. And then I watched the silent movie from the 30s, I want to say 1930s. That is, I read a bit about it, and it's like one of the highly acclaimed in terms of the history of cinema. And then I started watching the one that I think is from the 60s, but I was getting tired of the moralistic interpretation from like the US perspective, where US adaptations tend to veer away from like the scary controversial topics, and I was just getting very curious how a European adaptation would look like, right? Like a French or an Italian or European adaptation would look like. And so I didn't finish that one, and then I kind of got demotivated, but I still want to do the video, so I'm not going to keep talking about the book. And hopefully eventually I will make that video. because I would really like to do it. It's been really fun to watch like the different adaptations and to read more about the book and stuff. And shout out to Pros and Codes, because thanks to her, I read this book. It's her favorite book of all time, and I been wanting to read it since I first heard her talk about it. So that would be my best book that I've read so far in the year. And also, this particular edition is one of the most beautiful books that I've bought this year. Just like classic, elegant hardcover, literary hardcover. No shiny stuff, no sprayed anything. I like sprayed edges. I really love a good classic elegant hardcover. So moving on to the next question, and that's what is the sequel you've read so far in the year? And that would be Forest Mage by Robin Hobb, which is book 2 in the Soldier Son trilogy. In the Soldier Son trilogy, we are following a soldier son. So in this world, it's very much like based in, Robin Hobb is always inspired by history, by classics and stuff. And so in this world, it's one of these where no, son number 1 is the heir, son number 2 is a soldier, son number 3 is a priest, right? And so we're following a soldier's son. It's really interesting just from the get-go, that premise of following the second son instead of the first son, instead of the heir, which is always like, I feel like in fantasy you're always following like the heir to the throne, things like that. So you are following him, and in book 1 it's very much about him in the academy, the military academy, pursuing his lifelong mission of becoming a soldier son, right? And then in book 2, as things develop, he I don't know if I want to talk about it because it's a sequel, right? Maybe I'll talk more about it in another video. I always promise videos and I never know if I will film them or not, but I won't say much so as not because I can't say much without spoiling book 1. But I will say that this is right up there in terms of darkness with Notre Dame. The only reason why Notre Dame would be more dark is because it's very real, right? And this one, while it's also very real, because Robin Hobb does take inspiration, and there's a lot of social commentary about religion, about beauty standards, about patriarchy, about ableism, about ancestral, like Christianity taking over pagan cultures, like the cruelty of social standards and expectations. There's a really, really, really interesting commentary on like the mediocre white man, without it being blatant. I've never heard anyone talk about it, but in my view, it's like a commentary on that. So it's really amazing, and like one of a reviewer that I really like, he in his video he said, make no mistake, this is Robin Hobb at her best. This is a very misunderstood series and a lot of people don't like it. I personally think it's fantastic, and as he said, make no mistake, this is Robin Hobb at her best. I wouldn't recommend starting with this if you've never read Robin Hobb. But who knows? I hate when people say that. Sometimes you pick up books where they are the books that everyone says don't start with that. Oh, actually, Justin started the Discworld series, and he started with book one, even though everyone said not to start with book one, and he loved it, right? So like, I really don't like to say that. So I mean, next question is a new release that you want to read but haven't read yet. So I'm going to talk about a book from last year that I think it released in February, but then the audiobook released in November. And I do think that I would listen to the audiobook, although it's one of those books that I would be curious about the physical copy, because it's one of these books that are published because the authors have a podcast. It's a history book from a history podcast that I love, and then the authors are doing a book. So the podcast is okay. I'm going to give you the pitch that they always give, right? So it is a podcast run by two lesbian feminist historians, and it is about nuns in the Baroque period. It's fantastic, fabulous. It's hilarious, so funny, but also so cool. I feel like the badassery of nuns is highly underrated, and if you listen to that podcast, it's quite clear, right? You're like, yeah. So the book is Convent Wisdom: How 16th Century Nuns Could Save Your 21st Century Life. So it has a very cutesy commercial title. Um, but you know, they are really great. The podcast is really great, so I trust them, and I really want to read it. So the book is in English, the podcast is in Spanish. So if you speak Spanish, you can listen to the podcast. Highly recommend. And if you don't, then you can read the book. And then the next question is a book, the most anticipated book for the second half of the year, and I'm going to talk about two because I want to show you how my mind works in terms of new releases, right? Like the new releases that I usually pay attention to. Usually it will go from two extremes. So it will either be like niche nonfiction published or written by people I follow, like scholars I follow on social media, you know, historians or sociologists or anthropologists or archaeologists or theologians, people I follow on social media that promote the books that they have written, and often that's very random, and often I come across the book first and then I start following the person. That also happens. And so it's either that or like just general commercial romance. Those are my two. Those two are always on my radar, so I'm going to mention one of each. So for the niche nonfiction thing, it's A Catechism of the Strange: Stigmata, Relics, and the Miracles That Shape the Soul by W. Tyler Allen, who has a podcast called Saint Anthony's Tongue. I've never listened to his podcast, but I love his posts on social media. He makes videos and reflections on Catholicism, but really cool and really great. I really love his posts. So, A Catechism of the Strange, Stigmata, Relics, and the Miracles That Shape the Soul. And then on the romance side, it I guess my number one that I'm currently like really want to know what it's going to be is the new Mariana Zapata. She has been teasing it on Instagram, but she hasn't showed what it's going to be yet. So I'm eagerly awaiting for that announcement. And then book two in the Good Spirits Christmas series by B.K. Borison, which will come out later in the year. I loved book one, Good Spirits, which is a romance between a woman and the ghost of Christmas and her ghost of Christmas past. I think it's a fantastic premise and it was just amazing. So I'm looking forward for book two. It does have a title and a cover and everything, but I don't remember at the moment. Then it's the biggest surprise and biggest disappointment, and those two are actually related in that they are similar in theme and topic and what they are trying to do, but one of them is fantastic and the other one is one of the worst books I've ever read. Uh, Sadly, I do have the physical book for the surprise, which is also one of the best books I've read so far this year. But I had it in my previous attempt to film this, but I lent it to my mom, so I don't have it. So I'm going to start with a surprise, and that is Rapture by Emily Maguire. And this is a book that I read for the Read Good Challenge for the prompt of an Aussie book. So the Emily Maguire is Australian, and this is a historical fiction book following a female main character in the Middle Ages. So this is a historical fiction book set in the 9th century in Europe. So we start in Mainz, where we are following the main character Agnes, but then we go all the way to Athens and then Rome. So, we go to different places. So the premise of the book is that this book is based on the legend of Pope John. Popes John? Pope John? If you know the legend, you know kind of where it's going to go, where it's going to end. But what Emily Maguire does is that she imagines what the life of the mythical Pope John would have been, right? So it's like a biographical novel, but it's the biography of a legend, right? But it's a real life legend. It is a historical legend. It is a legend from the Middle Ages. What I really loved about this book, apart from the writing and the story and the characters and just the fact that it's just my type of book, 9th century monks, scriptoriums, manuscripts. It's just my cup of tea, right? But not only that, it's just that it is a really well done feminist historical fiction novel set in the Middle Ages, right? It is written in a very believable way for a woman of the time, right? It's not one of these types of like novels that take a woman from the 9th century and give her a 21st century brain, right? She loves God. She loves God's creation, very important. She loves reading about it. She loves theology and she wants to become a scholar, and so she meets a monk who helps her disguised as a man to join a monastery and become a scribe in the scriptorium and just read theology and stuff, right? Um, they do end up falling in love, and through all of her experiences, she is going to have questions, right? Um, because it is very much like what I'm doing is a sin, but also if God created me, then why is it, right? It is this like dilemma, but in a very realistic way, where it doesn't feel like from the get-go the character is like a 21st century woman in the 9th century, right? And it's really beautiful, it's really impactful. And if you know the legend, you know where it's going to end, but the way that you get there is stunning, and the way it is written is stunning, and the ultimate message of the novel, right, about the body, about women, about carnality, about sexuality. It's so beautiful, it's so beautiful, and so impactful, and so powerful, and also so cool. It's just, if you just enjoy reading historical fiction in the Middle Ages, if you enjoy reading about, being in the scriptorium, copying manuscripts, that vibe, and then eventually again the politicking of Rome, there's a stop in Athens first, like, um it's really amazing. Highly recommend. If it's your sort of thing, it's fantastic. And then my biggest disappointment is a disappointment because it's a novel that I had been wanting to read for ages. It's a novel everyone loves. It's a novel that has won awards, and on paper it should have been perfect for me. So on one hand, it's a disappointment because I was expecting to love it and I didn't, but then also because it's one of the worst books I have ever read, just period. This is also a novel, historical fiction set in the Middle Ages, following a real woman from history. Rapture is like following a legend, but it's a legend taken from history, which is why I do this parallel. This one is following a historical figure, and it wants to be feminist, right? Um, as I said, it won awards. Everyone loves it, but it's just genuinely baffling to me. Just the novel is Matrix by Lauren Groff. I don't I I'm going to read to you my Goodreads review because I feel like I could go on a 1 hour rant about this book. So just to sum up, it genuinely confuses me that she chose to write this book when she clearly has no respect for the Middle Ages. That is made very clear in the novel with different lines that she has. It is unclear to me why she chose Marie de France as her main character, and then she completely disregards her work, um, her contributions to literature, to the history of literature. I don't understand how you can say you're embarking on a feminist literary project, and then the real life women that you are writing about, you are just dismissing their entire work, their entire reputation. You have Eleanor of Aquitaine, you have Matilda, Empress Matilda, you have these women that, you know, are feminist icons, right? Like, and you are turning them into just petty women fighting against each other, being mean to each other, talking about each other's appearance, disregarding their heritage. It's just confusing to me. It's confusing to me. And so I'm going to read you my Goodreads review. So it's a 1 star, obviously. And it says, it's really sad to read a book set in the Middle Ages written by someone who has no respect for the time period. The quote unquote criticism and quote unquote social commentary that she makes is based mostly on stereotypes, which makes the criticism sound petty and renders it ultimately pointless. All the women in this book hate each other, look down on each other, make fun of each other's appearance. It's like every character in this book is a telenovela stepmother. Imagine having a woman like Eleanor of Aquitaine and making her entire characterization that she hates the main character. Imagine having a woman like Empress Matilda and reduce her to a washed up, spoiled matron. Imagine having a woman like Marie de France and ignore her contributions to the history of literature. Seriously, seriously. Why make Marie de France your main character and then dismiss her greatest work? Why make her your main character? Why write about her at all? Why? The story could have been set in any era featuring fictional characters. This is true. The story, if you take away the historical figures, right, it could be set in any era, fictional characters. I'm truly, truly baffled by this book. Genuinely confused. The only way to make sense of the author's choices is acknowledging that she was writing a vanity project. I There's this line in the book where Marie de France is regretting that she was born in the Middle Ages instead of antiquity, because if she had been born in ancient Greece or Rome, she would have had other intelligent people to talk to, other scholars, other interesting people. And instead, she's stuck in the dark ages where everyone is dumb and everyone is um, no scholars, no interesting people, no artists, no one to talk to, no one to understand her genius. Which, by the way, her genius has nothing to do with her real life genius, right? Which is in her contribution to literature, to, fairy tales, to fantasy, to romance, to literature in general. Her genius is that she is an abbess and she builds a matrix to protect her nuns, who, by the way, she completely manipulates and has just locked in because she hated and resents the fact that her stepmother, Eleanor of Aquitaine, sent her to be the abbess. She, instead of being a lady of the court, she spent half the book criticizing the vapid, empty ladies of the court, and half the book regretting that she could never be one. That all that she ever dreamed about was becoming a lady of the court. And instead she's stuck in this convent. And she hates it because at 5 years old she discovered that God was a lie told by men to control women. At 5 years old, or 6 or 4, she was a young child. I wish I had a literal quote. I don't. I hate read this book. I hate listened to this book. But it is a direct quote saying, "I wish I had been born in antiquity because I would have someone interesting to talk to." That is a quote in the book. Um, I wish I had it so I could read it to you guys. So yeah, it's just baffling. The only mention of her work is when her stepmother, Eleanor of Aquitaine, who is a telenovela stepmother and hates her so much, is going to send her to be an abbess in a convent. Abbey, I never know the proper terminology in English. And so she wants to escape that fate. And so in one night she thinks, oh, you know what I could do? I could write some just like simple romantic quick stories to entertain my stepmother, and maybe that will save my fate. And so there's like two paragraphs of the novel. In one night, she writes her entire all the lace to escape her fate of becoming the abbess of the convent. That's it. That's from that point. She never writes anything. She just becomes this abbess that hates everyone, and because of that, she wants to protect her nuns. All the nuns inside the convent hate each other. They talk about each other. They're mean to each other. They're like, did you see the way she's dressed? Did you see her hair? Did you see her weight? Did you see how ugly she is? I don't understand how this is a feminist novel. I truly, truly don't. Just because you are writing a 21st century thoughts into your historical fiction, everyone is applauding you, but it's not feminist to disregard real women from history. It's not feminist to have your women fighting each other and being mean and petty to each other. It's confusing. It's confusing. It's a disappointment. It's really bad, and I don't know. Like, I wouldn't recommend it, but what do I know? People seem to love this book. The next question is my favorite question. You know this, my newest fictional crush, and so in terms of like newest fictional crush, I would say, and this comes from the book and not the movie, Maggie O'Farrell's William Shakespeare. So I don't have a crush on William Shakespeare. I specifically have a crush on Maggie O'Farrell's William Shakespeare from the novel from Hamnet. Yes, he's played by Paul Mescal in the movie. Yes, I had never seen Paul Mescal before, and after seeing that movie, I now have a crush on him. But my fictional book crush is with the book character. Everyone talks about how sad the book is, but no one talks about how romantic it is. And it is incredibly romantic. And also really sad, but also really romantic. I also have to mention Raksh from Amina Al Sirafi series, but he's my crush since book one last year or the year before. So it's not the newest fictional crush, but I love Raksh and I have to mention him. Um, yeah, so newest favorite character. I have many always because I always get attached to characters, but I'm going to mention Pierre Gringoire. I feel so weird calling him Pierre Gringoire. From Notre Dame de Paris by Victor Hugo. He is one of the characters we are following. He is a writer that falls and falls and falls and falls because this book is all about suffering and injustice and a lot of social critique. He's so funny. He is always like, he's one of those characters who's always looking out for himself. Everything he does is motivated by his gain, right? By bettering himself, bettering his situation, but he always ends up worse and worse and worse. And it's really funny to read because he's really funny. He's really like grandiose with his language and just very like, he considers himself like a poet and a philosopher, and he develops this crush. I mean, he loves Jolly, who is Esmeralda's goat, and he's just a joy to follow. It's so funny, hilarious, makes me laugh. I'm pretty sure one of the gargoyles, they're not technically gargoyles, but known as gargoyles from the Disney movie. I'm pretty sure one of them is, his character is based on him because he's not in the movie. His name is not Pierre, but I think his personality resembles that of Pierre Grimoire. Then a book that made you happy, and that would be Clear by Caris Davis. That book is so heartwarming, it's so beautiful. It follows the developing friendship, relationship, crush between two men in a secluded Scottish island in, I want to say, 1800s, 1700s. I don't remember. I'll put it on screen. It's a historical fiction novel where you have a man named Ivar who is the last remaining inhabitant of a remote Scottish island. And is it John? Oh my god, I forgot his name, but he is a priest, and he's also come down on his luck, he and his wife, and so he takes a job that sends him to evict Ivar from his island. So he takes a ship to go to the island to tell Ivar that he has to leave. Ivar has known nothing his whole life except that island, and now he's all alone in the island because everyone has left. And so when the priest arrives, um, they have an accident, and so it's like a shipwreck type of situation where he shows up in the beach, um, almost dead, and so Ivar rescues him, like he grabs him, takes him to his cottage, and he mends him, takes care of him until he wakes up. And then you follow them in the time during the time in the island. Ivar only speaks the language of the island, and the priest only speaks English. He doesn't know Ivar's language, and vice versa. And so a really delightful part of the novel is, it's a novella, it's really short. A really delightful part is following them in trying to communicate with each other while not speaking each other's language, and the way they teach each other, the way they learn each other's language, the way their languages differ, the way that the island language is structured, the way they have so many words for different types of waves, um, and through that they develop a friendship and eventually feelings for each other. Now the priest, I forget his name, he has a wife, and so you are following different like lines, threads of the story, where you are following the story of him and his wife, and you fall in love with that story, and then you're following the story of him and Ivar, and you fall in love with that story, and those two stories will eventually collide in one, but I won't spoil the ending for you. But it's just the story of Ivar and the priest, and also with his wife, everything is just lovely and heartwarming and tender and beautiful. And then I don't want to say how it ends, and I don't want to say if it remains beautiful and heartwarming and tender, because part of the novel is the suspense of how it's going to end. Um, but throughout the book, it's very heartwarming. And then a book that made you cry, and I have two books that were so sad that they just gutted my soul to the point where I could not even cry. It's just this stunned, they leave you stunned of sadness, which would be Hamnet by Maggie O'Farrell and Notre Dame de Paris by Victor Hugo. And then the one that did make me cry was Forest Mage by Robin Hobb. It took me aback. It final two pages, you reach one paragraph that suddenly you're like, whoa, where did this come from? And also Braiding Sweetgrass, some chapters in that made me cry. And then the most beautiful book you've bought or received this year. I will insert a clip. And then finally, the books that you have to read for the end of the year. So there are many. I'm going to say Historathon, a lot for Historathon. As I said, I was having a really great Historathon year for the first 3 months of the year. I had some really excellent quarter two books planned. It's a bummer. But I have some really excellent quarter three and four books planned. So, Historathon, my body reading with Elle, it's always such a comfort to me to know, no matter what is going on, whether we're filming, whether we're not filming, whether we're reading other stuff, whether we're not reading other stuff, whatever is going on in our personal life, we are always body reading something. And it's honestly just become like a part of my life. And I love it, and it's really great. And so, whatever, we keep body reading in the year. And I was going to say something else. Historathon, but the Read Good Challenge, the Read Good Challenge. So the first 3 months, I excellent. I was doing so well. I was so motivated. I was sure I was going to fulfill every prompt. These 3 months kind of went to but I have resumed my reading, so I'm reading the book for July, and I'm confident that I can go back and read these prompts and then finish the challenge. I can do it. Come on, I never finish reading challenges. I can do it. So that would be it for this tag. Thank you so much for watching. I will see you hopefully sooner rather than later with another bookish video. And in the meantime, I wish you happy reading.